Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy on Xbox. And I really fucking love this game, man. They did a very good job on this, and I was really hesitant at first to get this game. But once I started seeing kind of like the reviews and everything going on and what they were talking about, I'm like, okay, I'll give this a shot. So it was like $10 cheaper at Walmart. So I'm like, okay, get that. And I did not expect to like this as much as I did. It really actually got me kind of out of my gaming rut where I'm like, okay, playing this game, it's okay. But this just pulled me in. It's a single player game. There's no microtransactions. You can actually go around and get outfits and shit in the game. And there's no online component. It's like, okay, this is like the kind of games that I really like, and this is really well done. And I just kind of want to support games like that. Now, of course, there are updates to fix glitches and stuff like that. And also, since I was playing it on the Series X, I did get smart delivery for it to be upgraded to Series X performance. Now, granted, I played it in performance mode, not quality mode, and it still looks beautiful and still drew me into the world. And I could closely kind of compare it to kind of like Uncharted, where there's certain instances where you'd walk around, solve certain kind of puzzles and whatnot, and that you could level the criticism of kind of like walking kind of simulator. However, they put so much care and attention to detail in the world that I just fucking got sucked into it. I'm like, ooh, this is a beautiful planet. And then, of course, the compatriots that you have in the Guardians would be talking to you and like making comments and everything, and that would just pull you into their characters and what they're seeing and what they're commenting about. And it's kind of crazy that I would look at this and be like, hey, I think that this would be a really good start to a Marvel video games universe. And it's crazy that it's a Guardians of the Galaxy one, because they do such a good job of doing the characterization for the Guardians. Like, to the point that I preferred this take of the Guardians over the MCU's ones. And it's not like I think the MCU's one is bad. It's just that how the MCU kind of came about, they didn't have access to all the different kind of like lore bits and everything that they could do that they do in this one. I mean, this is deep into Marvel lore, to the point that I would see a certain character that I didn't even know about, and I actually had to look into them and be like, oh, that's pretty cool, and like learn something, and I'm like, yes, I like that, I love that. And I mean, shit, at one point I like saw a Dazzler poster on Peter's wall, and that's an important bit because she's an X-Men pop star, and to see that kind of level of detail and then have them in the universe and then have them talking about all this stuff, I'm like, yes, yes please. Oh god, they just knew what they were doing with this game. So let's kind of get into the story. I'm not going to get into a lot of spoilers because I believe this story is one of the strongest aspects of the game because of what you're able to do with the Guardians, learn about them, empathize with them, and go through their journey with them, as well as the overall plot of like how it really escalates, because it starts with the Guardians broke, needed to do something to get money, and then it kind of just escalating from there. And it escalates very well, in my opinion, where, yes, it gets kind of crazy and zany, but that's kind of the Marvel Universe, but it never just kind of like to make an awkward kind of jump. It's like, okay, boom, this is kind of where we're at now. That's kind of sucky. Oh shit, and then kind of going from there until we get to the end. It's just like, yes, more please. So I hope that this does well enough for them to do like a sequel, do any kind of other ones, because Square Enix, I was definitely hesitant on this because of it being published by Square Enix, because they did the Avengers game, and I played that on Game Pass, and that having the looter online shit stapled onto it really kind of fucked up how the Avengers worked out gameplay-wise. I.e., like, the Hulk it felt really kind of weird in the beginning. All the characters felt kind of weird to play, so that decision affected gameplay to a point where you're like, ah! And it just snowballs from there because Square Enix doesn't know what they're doing, and the developers have to do what they can to recoup costs, and it's getting. I was just like, yeah, I don't trust that, and I do not blame people for being kind of hesitant for this one as well, because I was, and I played it, and I'm like, I really fucking love this game because they just really know how to write the characters and their interactions. Another kind of important bit for it is there are choices throughout this game. So the thing is, I usually use a walkthrough to kind of look through certain things, kind of understand how certain choices would line up with what I would like to do or what I think Peter would try and pick as well, and what kind of ramifications that'll have. Now, granted, if that's not how you play, that's completely fine as well. Just make sure that you're taking the time to understand what your choices are doing, because sometimes you don't get a lot of time to make those choices. The only one bit that I would actively recommend that you need choices-wise deals with a combat element, which is a nice segue to get into that. So, combat, you control Star-Lord and give orders to the rest of the Guardians. And they each kind of have their roles. Drax is kind of like your stagger kind of dude. Gamora does more kind of like single hit, high damage. Groot can do like crowd control, while Rocket is like kind of like area of effect kind of attacks, while Peter flies around using his guns, which you then get certain elements that change up throughout the game, so that way you deal with certain things as well. Also, with the Uncharted bit, there are light kind of puzzles, but it just means that you utilize your Guardians to either like get to a certain place or get through a certain place. It's not very complex, and I hope if they get to a sequel that they do other things with them to just kind of like evolve them. But you fly around pretty much as Peter, going around. You get some upgrades and everything that, I mean, I had a lot of like resources that I got all the perks. I got all the ability points by the end to utilize all these different kind of tactics, and I found it pretty fun. Now, granted, it's not the most deep or kind of high skill level. Now, granted, I was playing on normal, but it's pretty enjoyable. I mean, I could see why people would think that this is the least kind of fun aspect, because depending upon what you got to do, but I kind of liked it because it showcased the Guardians doing their teamwork and getting through different kind of challenges together. And one of the important aspects is that you build up a gauge to get to Huddle Mode, and what happens is then Peter calls in all the Guardians, gives them kind of a pep talk, and this can go one of two ways. You get like certain Guardians telling you certain kind of things, and then you have to do a response. If your response is bad, only Peter gets buffed, and you still listen to the soundtrack, but you don't do as the rest of the Guardians don't have their kind of cooldowns lessened or them buffed up as well. If the response is correct, everybody gets buffed, and their cooldowns are a lot faster, and you get to kick a lot more ass. So that's the only one that I would recommend a walkthrough for, because some of the answers are not as apparent, and sometimes it's just kind of like hit or miss on what's going to kind of work out and what's kind of not. But it works out because you get to listen to the awesome soundtrack, and technically there's like 2 soundtracks, because they have the like usual kind of licensed kind of music that they've got. I mean, hell, I was fighting the last boss, and I had Tainted Love as one of my Huddle songs, which actually worked with what was going on kind of plot-wise. But there's also a second one that is done by this fictitious group, Star-Lord, that they made for the game that helps inform Peter's, of course, choice of his code name, because that was the album he was listening to as a kid as you start the game. And it's actually really good. It's a really good 80s metal album. And now granted, I kind of like more of the songs at the beginning of the album, but I was like, ooh, cool. Different kind of music, works out pretty well, and just kind of draws you in. Oh. Jeez. It just, they did a lot of things right with this game, and I can't, like, hit them enough for it. They, granted, there were problems and everything. I mean, trying to get to an outfit and some resources, I had to do some kind of buggy kind of maneuver to kind of get out of that. I had to look that one up. Let's see. Sometimes there would be some like weird kind of like falling off ledges kind of thing that would happen, and like I should have been able to get back in, but I didn't. Really kind of weird. Sometimes I would get stuck and have to reload a checkpoint. And at one point I had only one crash during this game, but that's because it was kind of nutty during a final kind of portion, and I executed a maneuver that kind of went a little bit weird, so I can understand why it happened, so I don't completely put it on the game. But those are kind of the only things that I really had problems with. Otherwise, the plot and the characters definitely weave themselves to make the story work very well. One of the kind of criticisms I usually give is that the plot demands something to happen, and I don't really feel that that kind of happens in here. Like, they don't demand that like characters act in certain ways to satisfy the plot. And conversely, it doesn't go too heavy on the characters where the plot loses all cohesion and we just have a character off in the distance doing some kind of weird thing that kind of like derails the plot altogether. Because that kind of scenario can happen if you're just doing character stuff and the plot pretty much gets away from you. Game of Thrones. Yes, that doesn't happen here. And oh god. I mean, they worked very well on this. I mean, to the point, like, I was enjoying the soundtrack so much that I got to the end credits and there was the option to skip it or fast forward it, and I didn't do either of those and just listen to the music because I was just having a good old chilly time, just listen to the fucking music. It was great. But yeah, I think any kind of Marvel fan would really appreciate this because it uses as much of the Marvel lore as it can and even just sprinkles other things throughout. It also helps because I saw that we're getting into Black Friday sales and that it's going to be like $35 at Walmart and I think $30 at Target. So if you're iffy and on the fence, I just want you to be aware of those kind of options. Now granted, you can get it for Xbox One, the newer consoles, PS4, PS5, PC, all that. Now granted, PC one, I don't know how their Black Friday kind of stuff is, but you could probably get it for cheaper. And now granted, I am glad that I supported this as close to full price as possible, which is a rare thing for me to say. Alright? But the thing is, I like this game and what it was doing, and I want to support more games like this, and if that sounds like a game that works for you, support it however you are able to. I'm not going to tell you to buy it at full price or buy it at like $1. Do what kind of support that you feel is necessary. And if this game doesn't sound like it's for you, if all of the things that I have said is the complete opposite of you, and you'd kind of like would use my review as a basis of like, hey, that's not something I want to be into, that's good, and you avoid it, definitely. If you're into multiplayer kind of things, this isn't the game for you. If you are into DC, yeah, this wouldn't be the game for you. But granted, if you like Marvel and DC, it's good to have like good kind of comic book games as well. Like, I like the Arkham franchise. Now granted, I like Asylum and City more than Arkham Knight, even though Arkham Knight isn't horrendous. There were just some kind of weird ass problems that would like pop up with that. Origins, I didn't really love it or hate it, but I liked what it was able to do with Batman. And this does what those did with the Guardians of the Galaxy. And I hope that they are able to look at this and be like, hey, that's actually really cool. Do that kind of stuff where you have a lot of lore, you do a lot of good character development, and you're just able to, as a Marvel fan, marvel at like all the kind of like awesome kind of places you are, all the kind of lore that you're into, all the kind of story beats that you're getting through. It's like, it's just plain in like a giant Marvel comic book thing that's like 18 hours long. And I took my time with this. I like enjoyed myself, and it was just such a pleasure to play. And I know it's kind of weird because like, hey, you don't really review video games that often. I'm like, yeah, because usually it takes me a little bit longer, and I usually wait for sales, because sometimes I'm like, what's going on with this? How long does certain kind of things have to take to get fixed? If there are problems, are they going to introduce microtransactions later? Now, granted, that could happen here. And if that's the case, fuck that noise. I hate that shit. Fuck it. But I really liked that you were able to actually get the outfits through actually doing something. Like, it's weird because, granted, I'm of the older kind of persuasion because I would play, like, games and you'd be able to, like, do certain things or whatnot and unlock those kind of things in the game. And then they're like, hey, let's just make it so that way people can buy that shit. And if it's your money, I get it, but it has led to gameplay and reward ramifications for games where it's like, you have to usually pay for these things. And here, it was just nice to actually go through the game and get these kind of outfits and then see them and be like, oh, they even have their own kind of little lore thing, which is an extra added bonus because then not only are you getting a different skin so that way you're walking around and seeing your characters and different things, you get lore behind it so that way it enhances the story. It's value added. And granted, it's not needed to understand the story, but it adds to it. And I will always like something that adds to something like that. So let's see. Story good. Combat I enjoyed, but I could see that if they started doing stuff to kind of like work it a little bit more, even though I really enjoyed it, there could be improvements, and I don't have any specific improvements at this point. Just kind of see what kind of works and what kind of figuring out that could help. Soundtrack is amazing. Let's see. Yeah. I think I pretty much hit all the beats because I don't want to go into spoiler territory because it's just a joy to kind of like watch this story unfold and see our characters kind of deal with it. And yeah, I would highly recommend this. And if it doesn't sound like that's for you, that's cool, man. Go find your good games that you enjoy and everything, and I'll always kind of support that. Yeah, so those are my opinions on the video game. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.